For Albert Trucco, we're playing e4, of course, e6, and I've done a couple things against the French. I think the line that I've recommended most recently is the Steinitz gambit, knight f3, and bishop d3, basically the advanced French, but without the move c3. So yes, we are sacrificing the pawn on d4, and we are aiming for very quick development. And in this line, in this gambit, the justification consists in these two factors: our lead in development, combined with the influence exerted by this pawn on e5. This pawn on e5 is an incredibly important pawn. We cannot afford to lose it, so we need to start by overprotecting this pawn. If we're allowing black just to go knight g6 and capture the pawn, this gambit loses all of its meaning. Of course, black can trade the pawn with the move f6, which is a very typical move in the French. But f6, of course, comes with a very heavy price tag, and even when the pawn is traded, oftentimes we can maintain our control over the e5 square with our minor pieces and with moves like bishop f4. So anyways, here we should start with rook e1. And now we bring this knight out to the b3 square. This is also very typical: knight b to d2 and knight to b3, preparing at the right moment to recapture the pawn on d4. So in many cases, it's not really a gambit because we win the pawn back pretty quickly thereafter. Okay, so here again, very important, right? If we play knight takes d4, we drop the pawn on e5. We need to start by taking on g6. This is the main line, actually. I'm pretty impressed our opponent knows this is the most popular, one of the recommended setups for black. But I've always felt that white still has the easier game because ultimately, yeah, our opponent gets the bishop pair, our opponent gets the h-file, but, you know, there's two sides to every coin, and, you know, the other side of the coin is that black now doesn't have a great place to put the king. And, you know, the king can stay in the center, but then the rooks are not connected, and the center is not a permanently safe place to be, especially if black one day plans to play f6. Queen side is obviously very risky, and the king side is also not a good place to go because the h-file can then be repurposed. We can basically usurp that file from black in the long run. So we're going to start by playing c3, overprotecting this knight. Very standard move. We can also at some point play the move h3 so that we don't have to worry in the long run about the pressure exerted by black's rook. And the position now takes on kind of a slower character because the center remains closed. Nothing happens super fast here. So we have the time now to make a couple of nice little improving moves like h3. At the same time, of course, there's like very high tactical potential in this position because the moment something opens up, things can get very tactical here. But obviously, like, I think white is better because of our monster knight on d4. Now, what's the priority in this position? Well, we really do want to bring this bishop out at some point. But giving up the pawn on b2, although not the stupidest idea in the world, is just not necessary, especially because we have many ways that we can just, first of all, protect this pawn. One thing that I really like here is this move b4. Now, typically, it's not a recommended move in most French positions because black has a knight. And if black had a knight here, weakening the square on c4 might be a somewhat unwise idea positionally. But because black does not have the piece with which to exploit the c4 square, it's perfectly fine, actually very productive, to play the move b4 because on top of protecting this pawn, we're grabbing very important space and further discouraging black from castling to the queen side, which is now essentially going to be a war zone due to like a4 and b5. Okay, so first question to answer, is black actually threatening to take on e5? I know you're probably thinking no for sure, but the answer actually is yes. Like, black is threatening to take on e5 because there is no obvious discovery against the queen. We have two choices. We can either move the bishop again, or, for example, play pawn to f4, which is unnecessarily weakening and would, like, hem in our bishop. We can also play a very advanced move here, queen to d2. Now, question on your mind should be, how does this help in the event of queen takes e5? And hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate that. The idea here is not to win the game immediately. You should not be looking for an immediate refutation. The idea is by and large positional. Remember that the pawn on e5 can be sacrificed under the condition that you are able then with your pieces to control the square that the pawn formerly occupied. And as many of you are indicating, the idea is to play bishop f4, re-exerting our control over the e5 square, and in the near future, maybe even preparing a sack on e6, black's center there is far from as stable as it looks. On top of that, we have a positional bonus, which is we can play bishop g5 and isolate black with this nightmare French bishop. But this is a classic idea, obviously building the battery and then trading the bishops. You're probably used to like this happening when your opponent fianchettos the bishop, but it's the same concept. And now, of course, a4 should be pretty much automatic, exploiting, again, this weakness on b5. Now we're going to open up the queen side and just barrel through. Like, this is, strategically speaking, almost losing for our opponent. It's like a classic case of good knight versus bad bishop, but actually exploiting these types of positions and, you know, turning them into a victory is not easy for anybody. They're not easy for me either, and they require a lot of patience. So let's start with rook a5, just making sure that this pawn does not result as a moving target. Now, we're likely going to try to play mostly on the queen side, but we also need to remember that, like, at some point we can send these pawns up the board, some point in the future. But we also need to keep in mind that c3 is a target for our opponent. Let's continue our queenside campaign, for starters. That was just a blunder, by the way. And our opponent instantly exploits it. I actually missed this fork. Now, blunder is like a pretty exaggerated term. The question is now, which pawn should we give up? And I think the answer should be pretty clear. Actually, we can actually give up both pawns with knight b3. Let's try knight b3, trying to get the knight around to c5. One good thing here is we're giving black a choice, which is going to cause our opponent to spend some time. Always give your opponent a choice when possible, because people don't like choices. We like choices a lot less than we think we do. Now, the knight is hanging, so we need to get it around to c5. And the point of this whole procedure, it is not to play knight takes a6. You should pause the video here and make sure you understand why is knight takes a6 actually a really bad idea. It is counterproductive to all of our goals. In short, the reason is that the knight is like the strongest piece on the board, and giving it up for a single pawn is just not going to be a very good idea. So we're going to play very slowly, just trying to improve our position. And basically, we're making the claim that our opponent doesn't have any easy way to activate his pieces. That is not a correct claim because of a move that I just realized is much stronger than I thought. But in general, like, a better positional player would be able to utilize this concept. Yeah, rook to b8 here is super annoying because this pawn on b4 just isn't well defended. Yeah, rook to c4, I thought we might be able to play knight to d3 and replace the knight on c5, maybe with a rook at some point. Yeah, once again, I think this game started very well, and then I made that blunder. Let's go king f2. But I think I'm going to win in the bullet phase of the game. Now we're going to play rook to a2 in order to allow for the king to move into the center. Otherwise, black would have had a check on c2. I'm going to try to win without flagging, but I have to say our opponent is playing incredibly well. Like, I'm legitimately kind of getting outplayed in this game. Well, not really outplayed. I think I was outplaying our opponent, but definitely not a convincing victory if I end up winning this game. So, not easy these days. Not easy at all. Not easy to win a game of chess. No matter who you are, let's try to get our knight around to d6. Of course, I'm playing worse because I'm talking a lot, but nevertheless, kudos to our opponent. King e3, maybe? Let's see, king e3. Let's get the... No, we got to defend the pawn, f4. Our opponent's going to go f6, I assume. Yeah, our opponent is doing super well. Knight to b7. Let's evacuate. Oh, I blundered d2. Shoot. Okay, our opponent had a forced win there. I still think I would win this game on time. Just like our opponent's spending too long per move. He's spending too long per move, and the blunder's coming. Okay, yeah, there's the panic move. There's the panic move, unnecessary exchange sacrifice. And just pretty easy win here. Rook a1, rook c1, push the pawn. Our opponent gives up another piece, and now everything falls. Boom. Do some pre-move magic. And we win. Yeah, sorry, that was sort of a cheat code at the end, but not something that I have to use proudly.